So if you're seeing a theme, Earth Day being one with everything, being spirit, you are correct. And today I'm beginning a spring series. It's a 7-week series. We'll actually have a couple of guest speakers in between, so it'll take us a little longer than the 7 weeks. But during the spring series, we're going to look at what it means to be a sacred being of light and 7 doorways into that sacred being of light. Do you really know and consider yourself a sacred being of light? I think a frog just spoke. That's deep bass. I love that. And only to the extent that we can see all others and all creation as sacred life, we really can only see ourselves in that same way, to that degree. In my previous ministry, we had a teenager who ran our sound booth. He was 15 years old, and his mother was thrilled that he ran our sound booth. He was incredibly technologically savvy and could do anything we wanted to do, only 15 years old. He actually started when he was 14. And his mother loved it because that meant he was in church basically every Sunday, and he had to listen because he had to do the PowerPoint and everything. So after about 6 months of doing this, one Sunday he came in and he said, "Rev Darlene, I have a joke for you, and I think it really conveys everything you say every Sunday." And I said, "Great, what is the joke?" And he said, "What did the Buddhist monk say to the hot dog vendor?" And I said, "I don't know. What did the Buddhist monk say to the hot dog vendor?" And he said, "Make me one with everything." I said, "You have been listening, you got it, and you said it much more succinctly than I've been saying." To make me one with everything. You know, we all come from one life, one spirit, one animating presence, and we are one. We can never be disconnected. Sometimes I think of it as if all the world were cookie dough. Everything that is created has to be made out of that cookie dough. We all are the essence of life, of that. But we must also come to that realization as just that, as a conscious realization. Because of the fact that we have free will, we have the capacity to view ourselves as interconnected or as very disconnected. And that life is truly a process of waking up and growing into the awareness of what is always true. And so I always like to ask myself, well, if that's true, then what keeps us from fully living it, from fully being aware of it, from fully embodying it? And I believe it comes down to that we have identified with a particular way of being. That if you think about it, for the last 50,000 years, humankind hasn't really changed physically. But look at how we have evolved through our awareness, through our consciousness. Literally from primal cave people waking up and seeing the world first through our instincts, our animalistic behavior, if you will, and going into superstitious behavior and beliefs, and then beginning to move into higher levels of faith and spirituality and reasoning to intellect. So we've gone from instinct to intellect, and now very much the intuitive part of our being is waking up. That the way we are evolving now as human beings is very much at a conscious level. And so ideas of who we are, our being, is what is changing. And what brings about that change, the way we change any idea, is basically 2 ways. It happens through an insight or through an experience. That you may have not believed something, but if you experience it, you can no longer deny it. How many of you can literally remember a time of having your belief system shattered because something that you believed happened and then you had to believe differently? If you really begin to think about it, all of you will be able to find ways. You know, maybe you didn't believe that you could feel jealous, or maybe you didn't believe that you could act a certain way. Maybe you didn't believe that you could see auras or that people could really channel things. Maybe you didn't believe these things, and then they happened to you. And when they happen to you, you cannot not believe them anymore. And so what changes us is when we have an experience that we cannot deny. The other thing that changes us is insight. Perhaps it didn't happen to me, but it happened to you, and you told me about it. So now I'm considering that possibility. Or I'm reading and I'm studying, I'm meditating, and we get insights. If we are intentionally seeking insight and experience, then we are cooperating with this evolutionary impulse that is always seeking to bring forth more and more and more through our being, through who we are truly being. I think one of the greatest things that can happen to a person that literally shatters their idea of who they were and catapults them into literally a new way of showing up is a near-death experience. For curiosity's sake, has anyone in here had a near-death experience? Wow, look around the room, there's a lot. In my last congregation, there was a young man who he had a terrible addiction problem. He was driving home one night under the influence with a friend in his car, and he lost control of his car, absolutely totaled it, flattened it. It's a miracle that he lived. But they didn't think he would live. When they pulled him out, he was dead. They brought him back. They got some life signals, but he stayed in a coma for a significant period of time before he came out. And he eventually told his story. He shared his story with the entire church. And he described what so many near-death experiences describe about being pulled into this light and feeling something that he had never felt before that went far beyond feeling. It was this knowing all things, this sense of love, this sense of connectedness. And some of the things that he told me about his story, he said, after coming back and experienced everything he experienced, he said, there's no way you can ever go back to living in the dark when the veil has been lifted. There's no way you can put yourself back into a box, a poor me box, a little b box, a why me box. You can never put yourself back in a box when you've experienced yourself from the inside out and from the mountaintop. It totally changed him. Some of the characteristics of people who have near-death experiences, personality changes occur dramatically, including a greater zest for life, including greater self-assurance and peace of mind, an overall sense of well-being, a newfound sense of higher purpose and dedicating one's life to something beneficial, the capacity to let go of trivial things. They quickly develop healthier habits. They demonstrate a reverence for all life, dramatically increased compassion. They no longer have a fear of dying. They have a remarkable new perception of their self, of others, as what we may call God, and that God is all-knowing and everywhere present, and that we are that too. And then a total sense of interconnectedness to all of life. Many people with near-death experiences also come back and have healing capacities or a capacity to see aura or see energy or things that it's as if a new dimension of them have been awakened. Well, I believe that when the scriptures talk about to die before we die, and what we're seeking to bring forth are to be able to bring forth some of these qualities by simply desiring to have them. Because just as surely as we are desiring to have more peace, more love, a more sense of interconnectedness, just as surely as we are desiring to have these gifts operating through us, through healing energy, through light, this energy is desiring to evolve us. Does that make sense? I want to share a few quotes with you. Would you give me the first one? This comes from Rumi. I love the Sufi poet Rumi. He said, "One thing must not be forgotten. Forget all else, but remember this, and you'll have no regrets. Remember and be concerned with anything or everything else, but ignore this one thing, and you will have done nothing." It is as if a king, I call king G-O-D, the grand overall designer. It is as if the king has sent you on a mission to a foreign land to perform one specific task. If you do 100 things but not this appointed task, what have you accomplished? Human beings come into the world for a particular purpose, and if they forget it, they will have done nothing at all. And then the next slide, Buddhism says, each person possesses an inner treasure of infinite worth. To remain unaware of this and stumble about in spiritual poverty is a tragic waste. In contrast, a person fully awake to the jewel-like treasure. In Buddhism, they often use the symbol of the lotus, the unfolding flower, that we are unfolding in the awareness and expression of new dimensions of what we're created to be. That a person fully awakened to the jewel-like treasure of their own life is capable of truly respecting that treasure in others. And then the last one comes from a saying attributed to Jesus that comes through the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And we need to consider this for a moment. Think about, it's just been in the past 400 years since, as a human race, that we have accepted the reality that we now have today. 400 years in the context of how long human beings have around, that's not that really long time. That you just go back to the 1600s and in the medieval times when things were very, very different than they are now, that people were literally punished, they were killed for saying that the earth wasn't static, and yet today it's common knowledge. We believe those things. And so what has happened is we've evolved in many ways. We've evolved at the level of power and in the outer world. We've created weapons. We're at a point now where the most dangerous thing on earth is probably human beings. And the most precious thing on earth are human beings. That we are both of those, that we have created power outwardly, and yet we are in dire need of creating an awareness of our inner power to balance this outward power. That's what Teilhard de Chardin and Barbara Marx Hubbard and a lot of these modern age prophets, so to speak, are really talking about, that we really need to cultivate our inner treasure, which is what all of these same scriptures are saying. And so today we begin a series based on our 7 doorways, and what it means to be a being in different dimensions of our being. About 100 years ago in the British newspaper, they put a big headline that said, "What is wrong with our world?" And many letters came back, but the one they published simply said, "Dear sirs, I am sincerely G.K. Chesterton." You see, this man got that we are what will either heal our world or destroy our world. And so when we look at this series, we're going to look at what we call our chakras. Probably everybody in this room, how many are familiar with your chakras or chakras? You pronounce it either way. The Sanskrit word for chakra literally means a wheel, a spinning wheel. It's a center, a spiritual center. If you see energy, you can see 7 really clear centers. You see the colors. These have been described for many, many years. And what many people don't realize, it's actually in the Bible. Would you give me the next scripture? This is a vision that Ezekiel had, and listen to what this sounds like. "And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, the wheels went. For the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels." You see, this is a prophet who was seeing a vision of wheels, of moving energy, of the Spirit of God within a person. And then it goes on to say, "Like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord." And so we're going to look at our chakras, which basically are our I am, I feel, I do, I love, I express, I see, and I know. You don't have to remember that because we'll work with that every week. Today we're working with our foundation called the root chakra, I am. The other interesting thing is that Edgar Cayce wrote about this, and other people have discovered it. The book of Revelation, Unity looks at the Bible as being a coded book, if you will, that talks about the unfoldment of the human spiritual being, moving from the Adam man who was cast out, who lived in a state of separation and had to toil and work hard, all the way to the Christ man or the Christ being. And that the whole Bible represents, the places and the names represent different dimensions and aspects of our spiritual evolution. When you get to the book of Revelation, it is an incredible vision about how one becomes this Christ being. Other things people may not realize, for example, you remember the story of Moses who went up the mountain. Well, for example, the word Moses literally means to draw out. So Moses would represent that within us, that we all have something within us that is drawing us out, that is drawing out higher levels of expression and understanding. So in one particular scripture, when Moses is going to receive the 10 Commandments, he has to go up on a mountain. The mountain always represents a higher state of consciousness, enlightenment. But before Moses could go up to the mountain, he had to give water to 7 handmaidens, and he had to pick up the serpent off the desert floor. You see, the 7 handmaidens symbolize the 7 chakras being awakened and aligned. The serpent represents the Kundalini energy. The symbol of the serpent has long been used in medicine, and the serpent was in the tree, the Garden of Eden. There's a reason, because the serpent represents that life force that is awakening us. So that's, when you look at all of these things, you can find that they're really speaking about some of the things we're talking about today. So in the book of Revelation, just as we talk about the 7 primary chakras, the number 7 is a spiritual number. For example, when one of the disciples asked Jesus, "How many times should I forgive?" Does anyone remember what he said? 7 times 70. He wasn't saying 490 times and then you can let them have it. They knew the number 7 was symbolic of spiritual completion. And anytime you put a 0 behind it, it just magnified it. So to say you forgive 7 times 70 meant you forgive until there's nothing left to forgive on your part. The number 7 is found in the Bible 535 times. It's found in the book of Revelation alone 55 times. If you read that, you'll remember in the book of Revelation there's 5 angels, 5 mountains, 5 crowns, 5 candlesticks, 5 seals, and 5 churches or spiritual centers. A chakra is a spiritual center. And you'll be amazed that each week I'll introduce, like for example, today the first church in the book of Revelation is called the Church of Ephesus. And at the Church of Ephesus, what they were told they needed was to return to their first love. You see, that's the root of their being, the first love. So when we link these things together, and we realize that with the chakras, it's not necessarily this one and then this one and then this one. There's a certain degree of that, but they all work together. So by the end, you'll realize that all of these things are working in your life. So the first one is an awareness of the foundation of our being. It simply means to exist. And to exist requires us to be able to survive. That our foundational energy that drives us, that animates us, is the same energy that helps us be able to take care of our needs and survive, but it is also calling us to exist at a higher level of being. And when you link that to the Church of Ephesus, they were reminded that the most important thing you could do is to be connected to your first love. That what is most important, to remember that about yourself. I think about, one day I was thinking about the beach of North Carolina, or how many of you have seen a hermit crab? Well, there's something interesting about a hermit crab. It is a crustacean, it's a crab, but it doesn't have its own shell. And so when it is born, it has to find a shell to keep its little body safe. But the day will come when that crab outgrows that shell, and it needs a bigger shell. Can you think of a time in your life when you needed a bigger shell? And I've often thought what it must feel like the day that that little crab has to toss off the shell and run naked on the beach. Completely completely vulnerable, completely at risk. But it must risk its life in order to find a new shell, in order to find its new protection. You see, that's our survival, that we're always being called to evolve from simply living to truly existing. You see, the common denominator with people who had near-death experiences is they're no longer afraid of death. They're no longer living to preserve their life. They're living to give their life. There's a huge difference in that. In the spectrum of our lifespan, we are always growing into ways that we may let go of trying to save our life and connect with how we can express and give our life. That's the only way that we can truly ever be saved. There's a story that comes from the Sufi tradition that I think expresses this beautifully. There's a story about a peasant who was always struggling to find enough food and to take care of his family. And one day he was in the woods with his bow and arrow, and he saw a beautiful deer. And he grabbed his bow, and just as he was getting ready, an owl from above spoke down and said, "Why are you here?" And the man looked up and he said, "I'm hunting." And he again tried to pull his bow, and the owl said, "Why are you here?" "For heaven's sakes." And he tried to pull it back, and he said, "I'm hungry. We need food. I'm hunting." Once again he tries, and the owl says, "Why are you here, for heaven's sakes?" The man looks up, and the deer runs away, and now he's frustrated. He said, "Why did you do this?" Well, everywhere he tries to go through the woods and he hunts, but now he has this owl following him around day and night. And the owl keeps saying, "Why are you here, for heaven's sakes?" And the man, days go by, years go by, and it's as if he is tormented because whatever he does, it never seems to satisfy that owl. The owl is always saying, "What are you doing, for heaven's sakes?" And then as the story goes, one day the man falls to his knees. And it's as if the heavens open up and he has this realization. And when the owl says, "Why are you here, for heaven's sakes?" he says, "I belong here, for heaven's sake." And in that moment, he turns into a prince. You see, that story in the Sufi tradition is teaching us what we're saying, that life, we must come into this life and learn how to take care of ourselves, learn how to make enough money, learn how to be grounded. The root chakra is about grounding you. It's about bringing spirit to earth. There is a reason spirit wants to come to earth. Creation takes place in this realm. We live in a three-dimensional realm of cause and effect. This is the place where creation can take place. So spirit wants to spiritualize our human form, coming into form, but it is always saying, "Why are you here, for heaven's sake?" And as we learn and we grow and we master certain things that we can take care of ourselves, there comes a time in our life when this voice begins. How many of you remember that voice? That you could never be content. Your life didn't fit anymore. It was as if what you were doing, all of a sudden, you could not do it anymore. That you were being called into a higher purpose. How many of you can feel that? Yeah. It's, why are you here, for heaven's sake? Why are you here as a spiritual being? Well, when we realize this, and we're going to do a meditation in just a minute that is about rooting ourselves, but this week, one of the things that I am going to ask you to work with is to hold that mantra that I am here for a purpose. I belong here. I belong here. Would you say that with me? I belong here. I belong here. My family lived in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and after Easter, I drove home, and boy, that's a long drive to the other side of the state. But, every time I'm driving into this little community, would you give me that breathe? My body begins to relax, because where my parents live, I grew up in that home. Aunts and uncles live all around. It used to be farmland that my ancestors owned. And so when I am there, I totally feel like I belong. And when you feel like you belong, you're relaxed. You're no longer trying to prove anything. You can fully show up. When we feel like we belong, it influences how we show up. It influences what we believe is possible for us, and it influences what we believe is available for us. I want to say that again. When we realize I belong, it totally influences how I show up, what I believe is possible for me, and what I believe is available for me. I truly believe that it is time in our civilization where the inner power of our being is ready to rise up and match the outer power. And I believe that there are always forerunners, people that know this, And I happen to believe that a lot of you know that that's why you're here. That you're here to help anchor in a higher vibration of light, a higher vibration of love, a higher vibration of peace. And when that happens, you literally have physical body changes. Your body becomes that temple of light. And there are many temples of light sitting in this room. As a matter of fact, everyone sitting in this room is a temple of light. But there are many of you that know that something is going on with you, and you're being called to now be a healer, to anchor this energy in a new way. I believe the spiritual community, there is energy. My first few Sundays here, I almost could not stand up. I've been told that there's a bed of crystals under us. I don't know what's going on. I just know there's a lot of energy in here. Amen? That collectively, something is being amplified. And I don't take that lightly. I take it as a true blessing and an opportunity. And so I want to lead us in a song and then in a meditation that will help us ground. Because what we're seeking to do is to ground more of heaven on earth through your body, through your awareness. And this song goes like this. Many of you will know it. I breathe in, I breathe out, I take in, I give out, I let love, I let go, I release, and I know. Sound beautiful. I breathe in, I